Captain Richard Sterling had flown for 30 years. He thought he knew exactly who belonged in first class and who didn't. So, when he saw a woman in a hoodie trying to board his flight to London, he didn't just stop her. He humiliated her. He called security. He laughed as she was dragged away. He thought he was protecting the airline's image. But as he sat in the cockpit waiting for takeoff, the tower went silent. The engines wouldn't start. And Captain Sterling was about to learn a terrifying lesson. The woman he just kicked off his plane wasn't a passenger. She was the one signing his paychecks, and she was about to end his career in front of the entire world. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with a frequency that usually gave Jacob Vance a migraine. Today, however, she was too tired to notice. It had been a grueling 48 hours of board meetings in Chicago, followed by a red-eye to New York for a hostile takeover negotiation that had finally closed at 4 a.m. Jacob adjusted the hood of her oversized charcoal grey cashmere sweatshirt. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired college student or perhaps a weary backup dancer. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her feet were clad in limited-edition sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But nobody looked at the shoes. They only looked at the woman. She approached gate B42. The sign above the desk read, Meridian Airways, Flight 881 to London Heathrow. This was it. The crown jewel route. Meridian Airways was a legacy carrier. Old money, old traditions, and currently, old debt. That was why Jacob was here. As of 72 hours ago, the board had quietly voted her in as the interim CEO, tasked with shaking up the company's archaic culture and stopping the financial bleeding. The press release wouldn't go out until Monday morning. For the weekend, she was a ghost. She stepped into the priority access first class lane. The red carpet felt thin under her feet. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice came from behind the podium. A gate agent, her name tag reading Sarah, looked up with a strained smile. Sarah looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that comes from being yelled at by entitled travelers for 8 hours straight. "Economy boarding starts in Zone 4, Sarah said gently, gesturing toward the crowded general waiting area. "This is for first class and gold medallion members only." Jacob didn't break stride. She reached the podium and placed her phone on the scanner. "I know, I'm in seat 1A. Sarah blinked. She looked at the phone, then at Jacob, then back at the screen. The machine let out a happy chirp and flashed green. "Oh," Sarah stammered, her cheeks flushing pink. I apologize, Miss Vance. We don't usually see, casual attire in the front cabin on the London leg. Let me just print your boarding pass." "It's fine, Sarah," Jacob said, her voice low and smooth. "It's been a long week. I just want to sleep before we hit the Atlantic." Sarah nodded frantically, typing rapidly. "Of course. I have you right here. 1A, service checks are done, and you can head right down the... Is there a problem here?" The voice was a baritone rumble, dripping with authority and annoyance. Jacob turned. Walking up the jet bridge tunnel and emerging into the terminal was a man who looked like he had been cast in a movie about the golden age of aviation. He was tall, silver-haired, with a jawline that could cut glass. He wore the navy blue double-breasted jacket of a Meridian Airways captain, 4 gold stripes gleaming on his shoulders. He carried his hat under his arm, and his eyes were cold, hard steel. This was Captain Richard Sterling. Jacob knew the name. He was the airline's most senior pilot, a man who had been featured in the in-flight magazine 3 times. He was also, according to the internal HR complaints Jacob had been reading all night, a nightmare to work with. "No problem, Captain," Sarah said quickly, her posture stiffening. "Just boarding Miss Vance here. She's in 1A. Captain Sterling stopped 3 feet from the podium. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked directly at Jacob. His gaze raked over her. He saw the messy hair. He saw the hoodie. He saw the dark skin. He didn't see the CEO. He saw a problem. 1A, Sterling repeated, the skepticism evident in his tone. I don't think so. Jacob straightened her spine. She wasn't tall, but she knew how to take up space. Excuse me. Sterling stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale coffee. This is a premium flight, Sarah. We have strict dress code standards for first class. We don't let people board looking like they just rolled out of a shelter. The terminal was quiet, but heads were starting to turn. Passengers in the economy waiting area were looking up from their phones. I have a ticket, Jacob said calmly. And I paid full fare. My attire is clean and comfortable. There is no dress code for paying passengers, Captain. I checked the bylaws. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He hated being corrected, especially by women. Especially by women who looked like her. I have discretion over who boards my aircraft, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. And I say you don't fit the profile. Sarah, check her ticket again. It's probably a system error. Or a stolen credit card. Captain, Sarah whispered, terrified. The system says it's valid. It's a full fare purchase, issued directly from corporate. Then corporate made a mistake, Sterling snapped. He turned his body, physically blocking the entrance to the jet bridge. He looked down at Jacob with a smirk that made her blood boil. Why don't you step aside, miss? Let the actual passengers board. We can sort out your situation after everyone else is seated. If there's space in the back near the toilets, maybe I'll let you on. Jacob felt the heat rise in her chest, but she forced it down. In the boardroom, losing your temper meant losing the deal. She needed to see how far this rot went. Are you denying me boarding based on my hoodie, Captain Sterling? Or is it something else? Jacob asked, loud enough for the people in the front row of the waiting area to hear. A young man in a business suit nearby lowered his newspaper. A teenage girl pulled out her phone and started recording. Sterling noticed the phone but didn't care. He was untouchable. He was a union rep. He was a legend. I am denying you boarding because you are disruptive and aggressive, Sterling lied smoothly. He turned to the gate agent. Sarah, call Port Authority. We have a passenger refusing to follow crew instructions. I haven't refused anything, Jacob said, holding her ground. I presented my ticket. You are the one creating a scene. I am the captain of this vessel, Sterling roared, his facade cracking. My word is law. You do not belong in my first-class cabin. You bring down the value of the experience for our premium customers. Look at you. He gestured vaguely at her. You're obviously in the wrong place. Now step back before I have you arrested for interfering with flight operations. Sarah was trembling. Captain, please, the flight is already delayed 10 minutes. Not until this is resolved, Sterling barked. He leaned in close to Jacob. Listen to me, sweetheart. I don't know who you scammed to get that ticket, but it ends here. Walk away. Go find a bus. That's more your speed. Jacob stared at him. She memorized every line on his face. She memorized the sneer. She memorized the name tag. Captain Sterling, Jacob said, her voice deadly quiet. I am going to give you one chance to walk onto that plane, prep the cockpit, and let me take my seat. If you do that, we can discuss your behavioral training in London. If you don't, you are going to regret this day for the rest of your life. Sterling laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Is that a threat? Did you hear that, Sarah? She threatened the pilot. That's a federal offense. 2 police officers, summoned by a silent alarm Sarah must have triggered during the shouting, came jogging down the terminal concourse. "What's the problem here?" the lead officer asked, his hand resting near his belt. "She's refusing to leave the gate," Sterling said immediately, pointing an accusatory finger at Jacob. "She's belligerent. She threatened me, and I have reason to believe her ticket is fraudulent. I want her removed from the terminal." The officer turned to Jacob. "Ma'am, is this true?" "I have a valid ticket," Jacob said, holding up her phone. "The captain is refusing me boarding based on racial profiling." The officer sighed. He looked tired, too. He looked at the captain, then at the black woman in the hoodie. Bias, unconscious or otherwise, kicked in. The captain was a figure of authority. The woman was, well, she was causing a delay. "Ma'am, if the captain says you can't fly, you can't fly. Airlines are private companies. You need to come with us. You can sort it out with customer service at the counter." "I'm not going to customer service," Jacob said. "I need to get to London. I have a meeting that determines the future of this airline." Sterling rolled his eyes. "Oh, sure. And I'm the Queen of England. Officer, get her out of here. I have 300 people waiting to board." The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, don't make me use handcuffs. Let's go." Jacob looked at Sarah. Sarah looked down at her shoes, unable to meet her eyes. She looked at the passengers. Some looked sympathetic, but most just looked annoyed that their flight was delayed. Jacob nodded slowly. "Okay." She looked Sterling dead in the eye. "You win, Richard." "For now." Sterling smirked, adjusting his cuffs. "It's Captain Sterling to you, and don't worry, I'll make sure your name is put on the no-fly list. You won't be bothering us again." Jacob turned and walked away, flanked by the two officers. As she was escorted down the long hallway, she heard Sterling's booming voice behind her. "All right, folks, show's over. Priority boarding. Have your passes ready. Sorry about the trash. We're cleaning it up." The teenage girl with the phone kept recording until Jacob turned the corner. 45 minutes later, Jacob Vance was sitting in a plastic chair in the airport, holding Cell.Security office. The police had been surprisingly polite once they ran her ID and realized she wasn't a criminal, but they were still processing the incident report. They hadn't let her use her phone for the first 20 minutes. Now she had it back. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call the press. She dialed a number saved in her contacts as Chairman Henderson. "Jacob?" The voice on the other end was raspy. Arthur Henderson was old, but sharp. "You're supposed to be in the air. Did the flight leave early?" "I'm not on the flight, Arthur," Jacob said, watching the security monitor on the wall. It showed the tarmac. She could see Flight 881 pushing back from the gate. "I was denied boarding." "What? Why? Was it overbooked?" "No," Jacob said, her voice ice cold. "Captain Richard Sterling decided I didn't look like CEO material. He had me escorted off by police. He accused me of credit card fraud and called me trash in front of the passengers." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a sharp intake of breath. He did what?" "He kicked me off, Arthur, and now he's taxiing to the runway." "I'll have his head on a platter," Arthur growled. "I'll call operations. We'll get you on the next flight." "No," Jacob said. She stood up, walking to the window of the security office. She could see the massive Boeing 777 moving slowly toward the runway queue. "I don't want the next flight. I want that flight." "Jacob, it's already pushed back. They're in the taxi queue. We can't turn a plane around just like that. The FAA..." "Arthur," Jacob cut him off. "I am the CEO. Technically, that plane is my property, and I have reason to believe the pilot is mentally unfit to fly due to severe emotional instability and erratic judgment demonstrated at the gate. As the chief executive, I am grounding that aircraft." Arthur paused. He realized she wasn't just angry. She was executing a maneuver. "What do you need me to do?" Arthur asked. "Call the tower," Jacob said. "Revoke his clearance. Tell them it's a code-red corporate override. Then call the airport general manager. I'm currently in the security holding room near Gate B. I want a car to take me to the tarmac." "To the tarmac?" "I'm going to board that plane, Arthur, and I'm going to do it while Sterling is sitting in the cockpit, wondering why his engines won't rev." Inside the cockpit of Flight 881. Captain Sterling felt good. He felt great, actually. He had asserted dominance. He had protected the sanctity of his ship. The first officer, a younger man named David, looked uneasy. "Cap," David said, checking the instrument panel. "That woman. She seemed pretty calm. Are you sure?" "Drop it, Dave," Sterling snapped, adjusting his headset. "I've been flying since before you were born. You develop a sixth sense for trouble. She was trouble. Probably a drug mule or a scammer. We did the passengers a favor." Sterling keyed the mic. "Kennedy Tower, this is Meridian 881, holding short of runway 4 left, ready for departure." Static crackled in his ear. Usually, the response was immediate. "Meridian 881, cleared for takeoff." Instead, silence. "Kennedy Tower, Meridian 881, do you copy?" Nothing. Then, a new voice came over the radio. It wasn't the usual air traffic controller. It sounded deeper, more serious. "Meridian 881, this is Kennedy Tower, Supervisor. Hold your position. Do not enter the runway." Sterling frowned. "Roger, holding short. Is there traffic?" "Negative, Meridian 881. Your flight clearance has been revoked." Sterling blinked. "Say again?" "Revoked? We are fully fueled and passenger loaded. What's the problem?" "Company orders, Captain," the tower supervisor said. "We just got a call from Meridian HQ. They have issued a mandatory ground stop for your specific tail number. You are ordered to hold position and shut down engines immediately." "This is ridiculous," Sterling shouted, forgetting he was on an open frequency. "I have a schedule to keep. Who at HQ authorized this?" "The order came from the top, Captain. Ground vehicles are en route to your position. Do not move." Sterling looked out the cockpit window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw flashing lights. Not one car, a motorcade, 2 airport police cruisers, a black SUV with diplomatic plates, and a sleek airport operations vehicle. They weren't coming to the gate. They were driving directly onto the active taxiway, heading straight for the nose of his plane. "What the hell have you done, Richard?" David whispered, his face pale. Sterling felt a cold knot form in his stomach. For the first time in 30 years, he felt fear. He watched as the black SUV stopped right near the front landing gear. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a grey hoodie. The cabin of Flight 881 was buzzing with confusion. The engines had spooled down, leaving only the hum of the auxiliary power unit and the sound of rain drumming against the fuselage. The passengers, who had been settled in for a 7-hour flight to London, were now craning their necks. "Why are we stopping?" a businessman in 4C asked loudly. "I have a connection in Heathrow." Jennifer, the chief purser, forced a smile she didn't feel. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has informed us of a minor operational pause. Please remain seated." But Jennifer knew it wasn't minor. She looked out the porthole of the galley door. A set of mobile air stairs, the kind usually reserved for emergencies or VIPs on the tarmac, was driving toward the front left door. Behind it was a convoy of vehicles that looked serious. Inside the cockpit, Captain Richard Sterling was frantic. He was flipping switches, trying to restart the communication loop with the tower, but they were ignoring him. "Dave, get the door," Sterling barked at his first officer. "See what these idiots want. Probably a diplomatic bag they forgot to load. Bureaucracy. David unbuckled, looking pale. Cap, that was the director of operations car, Marcus Thorne. He never comes out to the tarmac unless a plane has crashed. Thorne? Sterling scoffed. He's a bean counter. I'll handle him. Sterling stood up, smoothed his uniform jacket, and put his hat on. He needed to look authoritative. He marched out of the cockpit, just as a heavy thud signaled the air stairs connecting to the fuselage. Jennifer looked at Sterling. Captain? Should I open the door? Open it, Sterling commanded. Let's get this over with so I can file a grievance against the tower for delay of service. Jennifer disarmed the slide and rotated the heavy handle. The door swung outward, letting in a gust of cold, wet wind and the smell of jet fuel. Sterling stepped forward, ready to dress down whoever was standing there. He expected a baggage handler, maybe a frantic gate agent. Instead, Marcus Thorne, the VP of Operations for Meridian Airways, stepped onto the plane. He was a large man, soaked from the rain, his face grim. Marcus, Sterling said, trying to sound jovial. What the hell is going on? We're burning fuel here. Did the Queen decide to hitch a ride? Marcus didn't smile. He stepped aside. Behind him, walking up the stairs with a slow, deliberate cadence, was Jacob Vance. The hood of her sweatshirt was down now, revealing her damp hair plastered to her forehead. She looked cold. She looked tired, but her eyes were burning with a fire that made the cabin temperature drop 10 degrees. Sterling's jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking grey. You, Sterling sputtered, his voice cracking. What? How did you get on the tarmac? This is a secure area. Marcus, why is this passenger with you? Jacob stepped into the aircraft. She didn't look at the passengers. She didn't look at Jennifer. She looked only at Sterling. I'm not a passenger, Richard, Jacob said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silent cabin, it carried all the way to row 20. Get her off, Sterling shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Marcus, call security. This woman is a stalker. She's mentally unstable. She threatened me at the gate and now she's breached security. The passengers in first class were standing up now. Phones were out. The girl who had recorded the incident at the gate was in seat 3A. She was live streaming. Captain Sterling, Marcus Thorne said, his voice booming like a gavel strike. Stand down! Stand down! Sterling screamed, losing all composure. She's a threat to the flight. I am the pilot in command. Under FAA regulations, I have the authority to remove anyone who endangers the safety of... She isn't endangering the safety of the flight, Marcus interrupted, stepping between Sterling and Jacob. She owns the flight. Sterling froze. What? Marcus turned to the cabin, addressing the crew and the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. My name is Marcus Thorne, VP of Operations. I would like to introduce you to Ms. Jacob Vance. Marcus gestured to the woman in the hoodie. Ms. Vance represents the Vanguard Group, which, as of Friday afternoon, acquired a controlling stake in Meridian Airways. She is the new interim CEO and chairman of the board. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and suffocating. Sterling looked at Jacob. He looked at her sneakers. He looked at her hoodie. He looked at the CEO standing in front of him. His brain couldn't process it. The cognitive dissonance was breaking him. No, Sterling whispered. That's impossible. You look like... Like what, Richard? Jacob asked softly, taking a step closer. Like someone who belongs in the back? Like someone who couldn't possibly sign your paycheck? The first-class cabin was dead silent. You could hear the rain hitting the roof. Every passenger was fixated on the drama unfolding in the galley. Sterling laughed nervously. It was a desperate sound. Okay. Very funny. Good prank, Marcus. You hired an actress. Is this a diversity training exercise? Because if it is, it's in very poor taste. Jacob didn't blink. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the passenger manifest she had grabbed from the operations car. She walked past Sterling, brushing his shoulder with hers, and picked up the cabin interphone handset, the same handset flight attendants use to announce safety demos. She pressed the button. Her voice echoed through the entire plane, from the cockpit to the last row of economy. Good evening, everyone. This is Jacob Vance speaking. I am the new CEO of Meridian Airways. A gasp rippled through the plane. I want to apologize for the delay, Jacob continued, her eyes locked on Sterling, who was now leaning against the cockpit door, looking like he might vomit. We had a technical issue at the gate, specifically a failure in our human hardware. She paused. I was just denied boarding on this flight. I was told by your captain that I didn't fit the profile of a first-class passenger. I was told that my appearance, my hoodie, my hair, and impliedly the color of my skin devalued the experience for you, the paying customers. She looked at the passengers in first class. So I'd like to ask you directly, does my presence here bother you? No, shouted the businessman in 4C. You let her fly. Sue him, yelled a woman from economy. He was a jerk at the gate too, the teenager in 3A shouted, holding up her phone. I got it all on video. Jacob nodded. She turned back to Sterling. The captain was sweating profusely. The confident Golden Age pilot was gone. In his place was a terrified old man realizing his pension was about to evaporate. You see, Richard, Jacob said, her voice amplified over the speakers. You made a judgment call. You decided that authority looks a certain way. You decided that respect is something you get based on a uniform, not something you give to every human being. She hung up the phone. The click sounded like a gunshot. Ms. Vance, Sterling stammered, his hands shaking. I didn't know. If you had just identified yourself. If I had identified myself, Jacob repeated, incredulous. That's your defense? That you would have treated me with basic human dignity only if you knew I was your boss? That's not a defense, Richard. That's an admission of guilt. Sterling looked at Marcus Thorne for help. Marcus, please. I've given 30 years to this company. I have a perfect safety record. You can't let a misunderstanding ruin that. It's not a misunderstanding, Marcus said coldly. I heard the recording from the gate, Rick. You called the police on her. You tried to have her arrested for credit card fraud, just because she had a paid ticket. I was protecting the airline, Sterling yelled, desperate anger taking over. Look at her. She looks like a thug. How was I supposed to know? The word hung in the air. Thug. Jacob smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just trapped its prey. And there it is, Jacob said. The truth. She turned to the chief purser. Jennifer, is the door still open? Yes, ma'am, Jennifer said, her eyes wide. Good, Jacob said. She pointed to the open door where the rain was still swirling. Captain Sterling, you are relieved of command. Effective immediately. Sterling's eyes bugged out. You can't do that. I'm the captain. We are in an active taxi status. You can't swap crews in the middle of a... I just did, Jacob said calmly. Grab your bag, Richard. You're getting off. No, Sterling shouted. He physically planted his feet. I am not leaving this ship. This is my plane. I have a contract. The union will shut this entire airline down if you touch me. Jacob looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded and keyed his radio. Send them up. From the bottom of the stairs, Two large men in dark uniforms ascended. They weren't airport police. They were private security contractors that traveled with the Meridian executive team. "Richard Sterling," Jacob said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You have two choices. You can walk down those stairs with a shred of dignity, take a cab home, and wait for the legal paperwork. Or these gentlemen can drag you down the stairs in front of 300 people, and the live stream that young lady in 3A is currently broadcasting to TikTok." Sterling looked at the security guards. He looked at the passengers who were all staring at him with a mixture of disgust and fascination. He looked at the girl in 3A. He realized it was over. Captain Sterling moved stiffly, like a robot that had rusted. He went back into the cockpit. He grabbed his flight bag. He grabbed his jacket. He didn't look at David, his first officer. "Good luck, Dave," Sterling muttered. "She'll run this place into the ground in a month." David didn't look up from his pre-flight checklist. "Goodbye, Richard." Sterling walked out of the cockpit. He had to pass Jacob to get to the door. He paused for a second, towering over her. He wanted to say something hurtful. He wanted to use every slur he had ever thought. But the cold, impassive look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't afraid of him. She barely even registered him. He was already a ghost to her. He stepped out onto the wet metal platform of the air stairs. The wind hit him, blowing his hat off his head. It tumbled down to the wet tarmac below, landing in a puddle of oil and rainwater. He walked down the stairs. The rain soaked his uniform instantly. As he reached the bottom, he looked up. Through the windows of the terminal, he could see hundreds of people pressing their faces against the glass. Word had spread. The passengers in the terminal were watching the drama on the tarmac. And from the plane above him, a sound started. It started in economy. A slow clap. Then it grew. Whistling. Cheering. Sterling walked toward the police car that was waiting to escort him off the airfield. He felt small. He felt naked. The king of the sky was leaving in the back of a patrol car. Back on the plane, Jacob Vance watched him go until the car drove away. She took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline fade. She turned to Marcus. "Who's flying this bird?" Marcus smiled. "Captain Sarah Jenkins is on reserve. She's already in the transport van. She'll be here in 5 minutes. She's extremely qualified, and she has a much better temperament." "Good," Jacob said. She turned to the passengers. "I apologize again for the delay, everyone. We will have a new crew here shortly. And to make up for this unpleasantness, drinks are on the house for the entire cabin, economy included." A roar of approval went up from the back of the plane. Jacob walked to seat 1A, the seat Sterling had said she wasn't good enough for. She sat down, sinking into the leather. Jennifer, the flight attendant, appeared instantly with a glass of champagne. "Ms. Vance," Jennifer said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just want to say, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I've flown with Richard for 5 years. He made my life miserable. Thank you." Jacob took the glass. She looked at the bubbles rising to the top. "Don't thank me yet," Jacob said, kicking off her expensive sneakers and pulling her legs up. "We still have a company to save. And tomorrow morning, the video of this is going to be global news. We need to be ready for the fallout." Jennifer nodded. "Can I get you anything else?" "Yes," Jacob said. "Do you have any blankets? It's freezing in here." Jennifer smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I'll get the cashmere one, Ma'am." As Jacob settled in, she pulled her phone out. The notification light was blinking frantically. The video from the girl in 3A had already hit Twitter. It had 50,000 views in 10 minutes. The hashtag Naja CEO in a hoodie was trending. Jacob closed her eyes. The karma had been delivered. But the war for the airline was just beginning. The landing at London Heathrow was technically perfect, a testament to Captain Sarah Jenkins's skill, but for Jacob Vance, the arrival felt like walking into a war zone. As Flight 881 taxied to the gate, the reality of what had happened over the Atlantic began to set in. The cabin, previously buzzing with the thrill of the mutiny, had quieted down. Passengers were checking their phones, their faces illuminated by the blue light of screens that were already broadcasting the incident to the world. Marcus Thorne leaned across the aisle in the first-class cabin. His face was grim. "Jacob, don't look at Twitter," he warned, his voice low. "It's bad?" Jacob asked, rubbing her temples. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. "It's viral," Marcus said. "The video has 12 million views. Every major news outlet is running it. The CEO in the hoodie. But the narrative is splitting. It's getting ugly." When the jet bridge connected, it wasn't just the ground crew waiting. Through the small porthole window, Jacob could see a sea of flashing cameras inside the terminal. Security guards in high visibility vests were struggling to hold back a wall of paparazzi. "We have a backdoor arrangement," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Private car on the tarmac. Customs will process us at the hotel. We can't go through the terminal." Jacob shook her head, standing up and smoothing her hoodie, the same hoodie that had started a global conversation. "No. If I sneak out the back, I look guilty. I look like I'm hiding. We walk out the front. Jacob, they will eat you alive," Marcus argued. "Let them feast," she replied, grabbing her bag. The walk through Terminal 5 was a blur of noise and blinding light. As soon as Jacob emerged from the secure area, the shouting began. "Miss Vance, did you plan this stunt for publicity? Miss Vance, is it true you threatened the pilot? Over here, Jacob, smile for the shareholders." Questions were hurled like grenades. Jacob didn't stop. She didn't smile. She kept her eyes forward, flanked by Marcus and 2 large security officers, moving with the unstoppable momentum of a freight train. She wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a lightning rod. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in a high-rise office in Manhattan, Richard Sterling was not hiding. He was plotting. He sat in the plush leather chair of Julian Greaves, a shark of an attorney known for 3 things: expensive suits, aggressive litigation, and a complete lack of moral compass. Greaves specialized in reputation management for disgraced public figures. He was the man you called when you wanted to turn a firing into a payday. "You look terrible, Richard," Greaves said, sliding a crystal tumbler of scotch across the mahogany desk. "Drink this. You need to look steady for the cameras." Sterling took the drink. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage that was consuming him. "She humiliated me, Julian, in front of the crew, in front of the passengers. She treated me like a servant." "And that," Greaves said, pointing a manicured finger, "is exactly why we are going to win. Listen to me closely. The law doesn't care about her feelings. It cares about contracts and regulations. You are the pilot in command. Under FAA Regulation 91.3, you have the final authority as to the operation of that aircraft. If you determine a passenger is a security risk, you have the right to deny boarding. Period." "But she wasn't a risk," Sterling muttered, the memory of his own prejudice stinging him. I didn't like how she looked." "Stop," Greaves snapped. "Do not ever say that again. From this moment on, you didn't deny her because of her hoodie. You denied her because she was belligerent. She was erratic. You suspected she might be intoxicated or mentally unstable. You were protecting the 300 souls on board. Do you understand?" Sterling nodded slowly. "I was protecting the passengers." "Exactly." Greaves smiled, a cold, predatory expression. She's a billionaire CEO who thinks she can buy the rules. You are a working-class hero, a veteran with 30 years of service, who was crushed by the woke corporate elite because you dared to do your job. We aren't just suing for wrongful termination, Richard. We are suing for defamation of character. We're going to ask for $50 million. And we're going to get it, because Meridian Airways cannot afford a drawn-out trial that paints them as anti-safety. When do we start? Sterling asked, feeling a glimmer of hope. Tonight, Greaves said, checking his watch. I've booked you on the prime hour with Tucker Vance. It's the highest-rated cable news show. You're going to tell your story, and you're going to cry. The interview aired 24 hours later. Jacob watched it from the penthouse suite of the Dorchester Hotel in London, surrounded by the frantic Meridian PR team. On the screen, Richard Sterling looked nothing like the arrogant bully at the gate. He was wearing a modest suit, his hair neatly combed. He looked tired, beaten down, and utterly sympathetic. I've flown for 30 years, Sterling told the host, his voice cracking with emotion. I've missed my children's birthdays. I've flown through hurricanes. I've dedicated my life to keeping people safe. And then, to be thrown off my own ship like a criminal, just because I asked a passenger to identify herself. But she says she showed you her ticket, the host pressed, though his tone was soft. She showed me a phone screen, Sterling lied smoothly. But her behavior, she was aggressive. She was shouting. My gut told me something was wrong. In aviation, we have a saying, if there is doubt, there is no doubt. I made a judgment call to keep the flight safe, and for that, I lost everything. Sterling wiped a tear from his eye. The camera zoomed in. I just want my reputation back, he whispered. I'm not a racist. I'm a pilot. The reaction was instantaneous. The social media tide, which had been firmly in Jacob's favor, began to turn. A flyboy. The captain is the boss. If he says you don't fly, you don't fly, even if you're the CEO. Stand with Sterling. Safety first. Terrifying that a CEO can fire a pilot for doing safety checks. Will pilots be afraid to ground unsafe planes now? Meridian, unsafe. Legal Eagle. Wrongful termination suit is a slam dunk. Meridian is going to pay out the nose. Jacob turned off the TV. The room was silent. The stock is down another 6% in after-hours trading, Marcus said quietly, looking at his tablet. The pilots' union just issued a statement. They are threatening a safety stand-down strike if Sterling isn't reinstated or compensated. Arthur Henderson, the chairman of the board, cleared his throat. He was sitting in the corner, looking old and frail. Jacob, we have to stop the bleeding. I agree, Jacob said. We need to hit back with the facts. No, Arthur said, shaking his head. We need to settle. Greaves called our legal counsel this morning. They are willing to drop the lawsuit and the media campaign for $40 million and a joint statement acknowledging miscommunication on both sides. 40 million? Jacob stood up, her voice rising. You want to pay him $40 million for racially profiling me? We want to pay him to go away, Arthur snapped, slamming his hand on the table. This isn't about you, Jacob. This is about the airline. We are in the middle of a restructuring. We cannot afford a PR war with the unions. We cannot afford a strike. The public loves a victim, and right now, he is playing the victim better than you are playing the leader. The room seemed to shrink. Jacob looked around the table. The PR consultants, the lawyers, the board members. They were all looking at her with the same expression. Fear. They were afraid of the noise. They were afraid of the stock price. They were ready to write a check to a bigot just to make things comfortable again. If we pay him, Jacob said, her voice icy and precise. "We tell every employee in this company that they can treat people like garbage as long as they hide behind safety protocols. We tell every black passenger that their dignity has a price tag. And we tell the world that I am a weak leader who can be bullied by a liar in a cheap suit. It's a business decision," Arthur pleaded. "Be pragmatic." "I am being pragmatic," Jacob countered. "The business is rotting from the inside. Sterling isn't the disease. He's a symptom. You think he's a safety hero? A man that arrogant doesn't follow rules, Arthur. He breaks them when they inconvenience him. He just hasn't been caught yet." Jacob walked to the window, looking out at the rainy London skyline. She felt the weight of the entire company on her shoulders. She could write the check. It would be easy. The headlines would fade in a week. Sterling would retire to Florida, rich and laughing. But she remembered the look in his eyes at the gate, the smirk, the absolute certainty that she was beneath him. "I'm not settling," Jacob said, turning back to the room. "Not a dime." "Then he will destroy us in court," Arthur warned. "He has a clean record. You have nothing but your word." "Then we find something else," Jacob said. She looked at Marcus. "How deep does his clean record actually go?" "On paper, it's spotless," Marcus said. "Perfect attendance, high marks on simulator checks, no HR violations." "HR violations are subjective," Jacob said, her mind racing. "Physics isn't. An airplane doesn't lie." She walked over to Marcus, grabbing his arm with an intensity that startled him. "The QAR data, the quick access recorders." "The black box data?" Marcus asked, confused. "That's millions of data points. It records everything from flap settings to coffee maker voltage. We only pull it if there's a crash or a hard landing." "Pull it all," Jacob ordered. "I want every flight Richard Sterling has flown in the last 5 years. I want to know every time he touched a switch. I want to know if he sped up to make up time. I want to know if he ignored warnings. I want to know if he treated that 200-ton aircraft with the same arrogance he treated me." "Jacob, that's a forensic audit," Marcus said. "It will take the data team days. And if they find nothing—" "If they find nothing," Jacob said, "I will resign. I will sign the settlement check out of my own pocket, and I will walk away from this company forever." The room went dead silent. Arthur Henderson stared at her, realizing she wasn't bluffing. "You're gambling the CEO chair on a hunch," Arthur whispered. "I'm gambling on human nature," Jacob replied. "Men like Sterling think they are untouchable, and people who think they are untouchable always get sloppy." She picked up her phone and dialed the head of IT. "This is Jacob Vance. Wake up your best data engineers. We have a needle to find in a very large haystack, and we have 48 hours to find it before the court of public opinion hangs us." Outside, the rain lashed against the glass. The war had shifted fronts. It was no longer about a hoodie or a gate agent. It was a hunt for the truth, buried deep in the binary code of a Boeing 777. And Jacob Vance was all in. The lawsuit moved fast. Depositions were scheduled. Sterling was enjoying his martyrdom, giving speeches at aviation conferences about the death of command authority. Back at Meridian HQ, a team of forensic data analysts worked around the clock. For 3 days they found nothing. Sterling was a good pilot. His landings were smooth, his fuel calculations precise. Then, on the 4th night, a junior analyst named Kevin found an anomaly. He flagged a flight from 6 months prior, a red-eye from Tokyo to Los Angeles. The data showed a master warning on the number 2 engine, a fire sensor fault. Standard protocol required an immediate diversion to the nearest airport, which would have been Anchorage. Diverting would have cost the airline $200,000 in fuel and passenger compensation. It also would have ruined Sterling's streak of on-time arrival bonuses. The data showed the warning light flickering on. Then it showed the circuit breaker for the warning system being manually pulled. The warning stopped. The flight continued to LAX. Kevin kept digging. He found another instance, and another. Sterling wasn't just rude. He was overriding safety sensors to avoid delays. He was silencing cockpit alarms that annoyed him. He was flying planes with known mechanical issues and failing to log them in the maintenance book because he didn't want to wait for repairs. Jacob took the file to the deposition. The room was cold. Sterling sat across the long mahogany table, looking smug. His lawyer, a man named Mr. Greaves, smiled like a shark. "Miss Vance," Greaves began, "we are prepared to discuss the settlement offer. Captain Sterling is willing to accept $40 million and a public apology." Jacob didn't sit down. She tossed a thick binder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that made Sterling jump. "There won't be a settlement," Jacob said. "This is just a delay tactic," Greaves sneered. "Open it to page 14, Richard," Jacob said, ignoring the lawyer. Sterling looked at the binder. He didn't move. "Page 14, Jacob repeated. "Flight 402 out of Tokyo, November 12th. You had an engine fire loop fault. You pulled the breaker. You flew 11 hours over the Pacific Ocean with a blind fire detection system because you didn't want to sleep in Anchorage." Sterling's face went white. The smugness evaporated instantly. That was a sensor glitch," Sterling stammered. "I used my judgment." "Page 20, Jacob continued, her voice like a hammer. "Flight 99 from Sao Paulo. You ignored a low hydraulic pressure warning on the landing gear. You didn't log it. The next crew that flew that plane had a gear collapse on landing in Miami. Fortunately, no one died. But the investigation was inconclusive. Until now, because we have your login codes overriding the system." Mr. Greaves looked at his client. He saw the sweat beading on Sterling's forehead. He saw the trembling hands. He realized he had been lied to. "Richard?" Greaves whispered. "Is this true?" "It's not just a firing offense, Richard," Jacob said, leaning over the table. "It's criminal negligence. It's reckless endangerment. I've already sent this binder to the FAA and the NTSB. They are revoking your license permanently, and the Department of Justice is reviewing it for potential prison time." Sterling slumped in his chair. The hero pilot facade crumbled into dust. He wasn't a victim of woke culture. He was a dangerous narcissist who had gambled with thousands of lives to protect his ego and his bonus checks. "You can't do this," Sterling whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm a legend." "You are a liability," Jacob said. "You judged me by my cover, Richard. But I judged you by your data. And the data says you are grounded. Forever." Jacob turned to the lawyer. "The lawsuit is dropped. He resigns effectively immediately, with zero severance. Or we release this report to the press, and he spends the next 10 years in federal prison. You have 5 minutes to decide." She walked out of the room. She didn't look back. 6 months later, JFK Airport had changed. The Meridian Airways terminal had been renovated. The stuffy grey carpets were gone, replaced by vibrant colours and open spaces. At Gate B42, the line for Flight 881 to London was moving smoothly. A young black woman, a student with a backpack and oversized headphones, approached the counter. She looked nervous. She was flying economy, but she had questions about her connection. The gate agent smiled. "Let me check that for you." As the student waited, she looked at the poster on the wall behind the desk. It was a massive advertisement for Meridian Airways' new initiative, the Future of Flight Scholarship Program. The poster featured a photo of a diverse group of young pilots in training, men and women of all races, and standing in the center of them, looking powerful and kind, was CEO Jacob Vance. The student smiled. She felt welcome. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, in the employee parking lot of a budget cargo shipping company, a man in a neon yellow vest was arguing with a supervisor. "I'm telling you, I used to fly 707s, the man shouted. "I shouldn't be driving a forklift." "I don't care what you used to fly, Sterling," the supervisor shouted back. "You were late loading the pallet. 1 more strike and you're fired from this gig, too. Now get back to work." Richard Sterling, grey-haired and broken, looked up at the sky. A Meridian Airways jet roared overhead, climbing steeply into the clouds, banking toward London. He watched it until it disappeared. Then he put his head down, got back on the forklift, and drove into the dark warehouse. Karma hadn't just hit him. It had grounded him. The story of Captain Sterling and Jacob Vance serves as a brutal reminder that authority is not a license for arrogance. Sterling believed his uniform gave him the right to judge others, but he failed to realize that true character is revealed not by what you wear, but by how you treat those you perceive as beneath you. Jacob didn't just win because she was the CEO. She won because she was prepared, observant, and patient. She allowed Sterling to dig his own grave with his prejudice, and then buried him with the truth. In the end, the airline flourished not because it got rid of a pilot, but because it got rid of a toxic culture that valued status over humanity. Never underestimate the person standing in front of you. The hoodie you look down on might be the very fabric of your undoing. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to see more stories where arrogant people get exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.